Now let's start the Q&A session. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are now having the Q&A panel discussion. Some of the developers that were able to join it have actually joined. So we have now Ryan Warner and Danielle Carrick. And we can now start asking the questions and all the discussions that we want about that. We have like more than 40 minutes just to talk and discuss different questions. So let's start with very basic questions. Let's say just to catch up one more time. What is your main subject and what you would like the things that you would like to point why the topic that you've been discussing today is so important nowadays. Just a few words about it to warm up the audience and to encourage them to ask questions. Who would like to start? Just raise a finger.
I can go. So I mean, I think the reason like why data visualization and using it with React is so pertinent to the moment, I think especially because of the recent pandemic. I think in the beginning, maybe a lot of you might have noticed that in order to help people understand and explain what was happening, a lot of news outlets were using data visualization to do that. Most notably, one was by the Washington Post. That was a coronavirus simulation, and that helped really understand and explain why it was so contagious. So that's something, if you guys haven't seen, I would highly recommend Googling it. It's been translated into like a ton of different languages as well. So I think being able to create these visualizations is so important and necessary, especially in this day and age. And even if you're not kind of like in a news area, if you are working on like a business project, that they're always interested in data visualization in terms of like bars and charts and understanding their data. So
Yeah.
I just can't really think of a scenario where you wouldn't need it.
Okay, that's true.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, my talk was called Hypertext Thinking, Building Personal Knowledge Bases in Public. And why do I find that so important? I think writing has a lot of benefits. People often think that writing is for other people, but if you write for yourself, I think you'll reap a lot of benefits. And you like write to learn, not to teach. That is not my quote. That was by Naval. But I think digital gardening kind of creates the right metaphor to enable that in a frictionless way.
Cool, thank you. Good answer. And yeah, as you can see, both your topics are actually about data retention and, let's say, data usage from different purposes, right? That's true, but still, it's all about information, about keeping the information, working with the information, and how it can be useful for you. Okay. The very first question that I already have here, quite active, is good question, how much statistical knowledge do you need to work as a data visualization engineer? And I'm opening this question as a little bit of discussion because actually it is important in both cases for both of you. There is a period of data accumulation before you can actually start using it in a full power, right? Both for creating charts or for having a consistent knowledge base. So let's go ahead and share a few words about how much data you need to accumulate and maybe how before it can become really useful. Who wants to go ahead?
Danielle, do you want to start? I feel like that question's a little bit more in your area.
Yeah, I can start with that for sure. So you definitely don't need to be like a data scientist or a statistician in order to create data visualizations, for sure. I mean, I think all of us in our schooling have had math class and created bars and charts and that kind of thing. You do need to have an understanding of your data for sure, because not every data set's unique, and the what you're trying to show with it, you need to understand what you're trying to show with the data, so you don't show like a line chart only really makes sense if you're showing trend data. So, or like a bar chart is really good if you're showing categorical data, for example. But those aren't very difficult to acquire if you're not used to it yet. So yeah, I don't think you need like a ton of statistics, or really almost any.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Let's pass this question forward. So in order to have a consistent and really useful knowledge base, how much data would you need to collect and analyze? I would say so.
Yeah, I'll try and adapt this question for the knowledge base area. I think the whole point behind digital gardening is that there is no minimum. A blog post would be different, I think. I think a blog post, you'd want to make sure you research the topic and have a point to present and back that up with sources. But with digital gardening, any amount of knowledge, I think, is enough to, plant a new seed on any topic.
Okay. I would even a little bit expand that. Well, in my life, I've been creating a lot of different knowledge bases, and I still do that as well as for myself or for the companies. And what I realized, the best approach is when I really understand the goal of that data, right? We always need to have the goal in any case. Why would you collect that data, and why? What is the reason of using it? Would it be a good knowledge or a set of errors that the most common errors, for example, that I would like to handle, or this could be different solutions and challenges that have been resolved in different ways in order to make to find out which one is efficient, if we are talking in terms of knowledge base. And if we are going to any data to visualize, for example, if I need to collect data about the performance of my teams, and I would like to understand how big is the gap between, let's say, committing to the repository and passing the code review, or what is the life cycle, and so on. I also need some data in order just to make some comparison, right? So in most cases, you have to answer the question why you need that data, what's the goal, what is the question that you're trying to answer. But even if you don't have a clear vision, starting collecting data just for the future is already a good point. Thank you. We have now Ryan Chenkie live. Hi, Ryan.
Hello, how's it going?
Very well. We started already the discussion, so you're just right in time. And we've got a question immediately for you. So, and again, it's related to the keeping the information and working with it. So what would be, sorry, just one more time. I saw a question about what is actually the benefit, or what is the difference between Nexus and Prisma? What is the functionality that one is offering on top of the other one?
Right. So Prisma is a toolkit. We call it a database toolkit. Some people think of it as an ORM that allows you to operate on your database regardless of what you might be using to create an API. Maybe you don't even need to create an API, but you want to have like a type safe way of accessing your database. That's where Prisma comes in. And so we saw this in my talk today, where you can create tables using this Prisma schema language thing that we've got, and it gives you this easy way to manage your tables. You get into being able to manage your relationships between tables with that notation as well. And then the generated code that you get from that is this. It gives you this type safe client layer to access your database, so that you are never going to write SQL to access your database. So that all works out very nicely. Nexus is a tool for writing GraphQL APIs in a very particular way. So with Prisma, you might choose to have a REST API, and you would just call Prisma in the handlers of your REST endpoints, for example, to get your data. Or you might use it in some like automated job run in Node or something like that. Or maybe you're using a different server. Like there's a in development there is a client for Go. You can have a Prisma data. You can have a Prisma model, have your database, and then access your data using Go instead of Node. So yeah, Prisma is for your data. Nexus is a very kind of opinionated way of writing GraphQL APIs. But Prisma can be used anywhere.
Okay, thank you. That's a good answer. And the next question may sound a little bit similar to this one. So the question sounds like D3.js versus chart.js. What's the difference again? And what are the benefits and so on? So who would like to pick that question?
I mean, I'll tell you what, I honestly don't use chart.js very often, so I can't really comment on what the differences are.
Okay,
thanks. Sounds good. Anyone else would like to?
To that a little bit based on my limited knowledge of it. I think D3.js is going to give you something that operates at a lower level than Chart.js. Chart.js, I think, gives you the utilities you would want to create bar graphs and line charts and pie charts and all these things. And I think you can arrive at that place by using the utilities you get out of D3. But D3 is lower level. You have to assemble those things yourself. At least this is how I conceptualize it. I've used Chart.js a fair bit, and I haven't used D3 as much. But that's how I kind of think about it. Yeah, Chart.js is going to give you your charting library give you a way to get to your charts more easily than D3 would, I think.
Yeah, I think that's probably actually true for a lot of different D3 versus other chart library type things. Like D3 tends to be at the lower level, like probably a little bit more of a learning curve. So while something like high charts or any of those other ones could get you to a bar chart really quickly, one advantage that I found with D3 is just like because you have control over the tiny pieces, if you want to do something like totally new, totally custom, D3 has that ability for you.
Okay, thank you guys. So I can summarize that probably the biggest difference is that chart.js brings you, like, you can maybe raise your charts faster and maybe a little bit easier. However, if you want to go a little bit deeper into configurations and have some more specific or custom elements, then definitely have to use the D3. Am I right?
It's generally true,
All
yeah.
right. Okay, thanks. I actually have one question for Ryan Warner. So the question sounds like this, and this is a very good question from the junior developers. What would be the best way to start a personal digital garden?
I think that really depends on how much upfront work you're looking to do. My choice was to use React and Gatsby/Next because I wanted that control and because I'm a developer and enjoy the coding process. And being able to create interactive blog posts that are clickable and have state, etc. But that might not be what you're looking for. Maybe you want to start your garden right now, today. And you can do that with services like TiddlyWiki. You could use Notion and make your Notion space public. So yeah, there's a lot of options, and I think it kind of depends on what you're looking for and what you're looking to get out of it in the near term.
All right, thanks. Cool. Next question. It's actually, again, it's probably an extension to the same question. So let's bring it together while we didn't switch the context. It sounds like I would like to create a digital garden, but I think I need a lot of self-confidence to create it. But I also think that the best way to learn is to teach others. So it's kind of a nice concept. So I realized, I think the sense of this question is what is the best, not only what is the best way to create a personal digital garden, but would it be in that case maybe useful to start immediately by preparing this information for the other people, or maybe even by coaching someone? What would you say about it?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The best way to learn is to teach others. I've definitely felt that in my personal life, and I learned a lot about topics that I'm interested in, things I didn't know I would learn by teaching other people. But back to the self-confidence point, I think that digital gardening has kind of given me some self-confidence and broken down some barriers that I have between making things visible to the world.
Okay.
Digital gardening has helped me not care so much that there is a final polished product. A blog post, for example, I would want someone to peer review it and maybe edit it, help me with grammar. But with digital gardening, if I learned about a new topic, for example, today I learned about D3, which is something I haven't really used in the past. I might just start my seed on D3 or charting libraries with a link to Danielle's talk, and that's it. Maybe a couple of thoughts that I had.
Okay.
So yeah, I think the whole metaphor of digital gardening is kind of built around the idea that it's a work in progress. It's about the path to getting there, not about the final product itself.
All right, that actually sounds quite reasonable, and it actually brings us to the next question. And this is a question that again I would like to share among all of you guys. We will start from Danielle. It's a question for her, but actually it's a wide question. It sounds like this. What's the biggest challenge you or your colleagues have faced with D3? In this case, I would point it personally to you, and then I will extend this question to the other guys in order to describe your biggest challenge in what you're doing. This is mostly important for juniors who are just joining any technology and they are actually trying to catch it.
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. I would say the biggest challenge would be trying to use D3 with a more, I mean, I think the challenge is also the greatest strength, because using it for some of the more complicated visualization types, the forced layouts, those sorts of things, definitely took a little bit of time to like go through the API, the documentation, understanding what the different methods you can use to try and achieve whatever visualization you were looking for. So, you know, D3 can be very powerful, but it also can be can take some time to like understand and get familiar with. So yeah, if you are ever kind of unsure or confused about something, just know that everyone will have struggles with it.
Thank you. That sounds really encourageable because, yeah, that's right. Everyone was junior in something at some point in time, right? No one gets born with all the knowledge immediately. Okay, let's move forward then to Ryan Warner.
I don't really have experience with D3, so I'm not sure I have much to add here.
Yeah, but it's I mean, each question is personal to yourself, to your own stack, and mostly to the topic that you're discussing. So in your case, that will be the digital gardening, and what was your biggest, let's say, challenge or struggle, or maybe the very first and the most interesting that you started with, and that I would say ignited your interest the more.
Sure. The biggest challenge, I think, was kind of touched on in the last question, which is getting over that hurdle of putting work in progress out in public for people to see, and just being okay with that, being okay with it being unpolished and rough around the edges and not fully thought through. But that kind of became easier with time and practice.
Okay, thanks. That's really fair enough. Okay, Ryan, Chenkie.
Yeah. So, biggest challenge with the stuff that I work on, I guess I could say that like when I was early on, I didn't really have a good conceptualization of how all of these pieces of the stack fit together. And, I found myself getting frustrated because there are all of these technologies that we hear being talked about all the time, and all these concepts and all of these layers that there's so many of these things that it makes it difficult to have a conceptualization of how they all fit together, or what does what is for what. And I think the lesson that I took there is that it really does kind of just take some time and it also takes a willingness to like explore different kinds of technologies that do the same thing. So after a while playing with things like this is back in the Angular JS days, playing with Angular JS and then playing with React and playing with Vue, for example. After a while, it became apparent that like, oh, these things actually aim to solve the same kind of problem in a different way for each of them, but I can see now where they all come into play. They're aimed at making single page applications, or for React it's like making parts of your user interface more reactive, or however you want to conceptualize it. And then figuring out that like, oh, if I want to be talking about Node.js, well, maybe I'm quite often talking about having some kind of API layer that might do some work on a server environment and save data to a database. So it took time and a willingness to like just pay attention to the different stuff that's out there to figure out how all of these things kind of fit together. So my recommendation there is, if you find yourself frustrated because there's just this massive amount of stuff out there, just be patient with it and kind of try to tread through it, and sooner or later it will all make sense in time. In time, it will all make sense.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. That's a good advice. And before we're moving to the next questions from the audience, there will be actually a good, let's imagine a situation that you now have a possibility to send a short message to yourself in the past, well, where you actually have been a junior developer, just joining your first job, maybe, or maybe just starting even learning this. So just a quick advice, let's say up to a minute, maybe, a quick advice to yourself, a quick message that you would like to send to yourself in that moment. Raise a hand if you're ready to go.
And go.
Okay, Ryan Warner, welcome. Go ahead.
So my advice to my past self as a junior would be to write more and don't stop writing. Make friends with other writers and read their writing, and be consistent. Write every day. I have started blogs and fallen off of them more times than I can count. In the past 8 or so months, I've been pretty consistent with it, and it pays off. And I wish I'd been doing that for the past 8 years.
All right. Okay. Thank you. I felt that vibe. Who's next one? If you're, yeah, you can actually skip this. It's like not mandatory, but that's a good just.
Yeah, I can go. I feel like my advice to like a junior dev or my past self, whatever it would be, is not so different from my current advice that I like to think about. Is whenever I'm struggling on a problem, or if I can remember a problem that I really struggled on, and then coming to it again a week later, a month later, however long, and being able to solve it much more quickly or understanding it much better. And I always remember those moments, so that the next time I struggle with a problem, I always think that, I know I'll figure it out, and the next time I come to it, it'll be that much easier. So just sort of always being encouraged, like knowing that you're always learning and you're never going to stop learning.
Okay. That's quite fair.
I can go as well. The advice that I often give to junior developers, especially those who are very new to web development, for example, is to find or come up with an idea for something that you would like to see exist, and figure out what needs to be done to make it happen. It's always easier to be motivated, I think, to learn things if you have something that you're aiming at in terms of like a project idea, rather than, you know, kind of following tutorials and doing hello world examples all the time. I think even if your idea for what you want to build is ambitious, and I think it should be ambitious, you will be better off that way, having like a quick learning journey rather than piecing things together over time with basic examples. The need to figure out how to make something happen to solve like each individual problem you come up with along the way is very helpful for reinforcing learning. I think that's been my experience, and I would definitely recommend that to those who are newer to web development.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Now let's summarize a little bit these advices, and I'll probably add a little bit of personal input as well. So, okay, the advice. We started with writing. Write everything. Imagine actually you're starting your career in your job, in your maybe dream job. Somewhere soon, in a few years, everything that you are suffering now will be just probably a joke. And in most cases, it will be just a good memory. However, if you start logging everything that you feel right now and you think now, it's your own way to analyze your behavior, the way your evolution as well, because quite often we ignore the way we grow up. Sometimes we don't accept our own achievements because we don't see them, or we measure them in a different way, where we measure them against some huge expectations. And you're right, it's fair and it's good to set ambitious goals, but we also need to keep the balance between being realistic and ambitious. And in that case, writing down what I feel just right now and reminding from time to time that in the future, this problem will become smaller. I think it's a good way. Cool. Thank you, guys. Next question, I think, would be, I don't know who's gonna answer it. The question sounds like, are there things that can be done in React but not in Vue? In other words, is React better than Vue, and why? Maybe it makes sense to add here one or two more popular frameworks like Angular or, I don't know, Backbone. So just compare as you would like. So who would like to go?
I think at a technical level, I think you will find things that each framework / library is going to do that another doesn't or can't do. Or maybe it's not that they can't do it, it's just that it hasn't been implemented in the other framework or library. I think at the end of the day, they are all aiming to provide the same kind of thing, which is, if I were to boil it down, I would say it's a way to build user interfaces. That's how I see it. But you will find that like Angular, for example, is aimed at being a full-fledged framework that's going to be very opinionated about how things are done, and give a prescriptive path, whereas React, for example, is going to be less prescriptive, and it's going to be necessary for you to bring other pieces to the table if you want to build a full single-page application, for example. But yeah, the way that I think about it is that they are all trying to allow developers to create user interfaces in JavaScript more easily. And on a technical level, that might look different, like in how the DOM is operated on, for example. But I don't think that those kinds of differences would be reason enough, in my opinion, to choose one over the other, unless you have some super strict technical requirements. For me, I think it's more so like, which of those frameworks do you resonate with the best? Because they do give you a different style of authoring applications. So the code that you write is going to look and feel different. But
Okay.
I
That makes
think
sense.
I think that's the reason you would want to select one over the other. And maybe there's others. Maybe there's like if you are in an enterprise organization and you want to have commonality between different teams and the way that they write code, Angular is a decent choice in that regard. But yeah, I think the underlying technical things they do maybe aren't the best reason to decide on one. That's what I've found anyway.
Okay, thank you. My next question is addressed to Danielle. So the question is, how to make the charts really responsible. And there was one more question that could probably be an adjustment to this one. Is there any way to make live and responsible charts while streaming data? Let's go ahead with this one.
So in terms of making responsive charts, I'm assuming they mean when you resize the browser, the chart also resizes. The way that we've achieved that is we have a div, and our SVG for the chart is inside of that div. And whenever the browser resizes, the React will re-render the page, and it'll re-render it based off of those new dimensions that it sees. So that gets taken care of pretty easily. In terms of, I think, the live streaming charts, if I understand that question correctly, I think they're referring to like feeding live data into a visualization. And I think the challenge there isn't necessarily like with React per se, and more just like with streaming APIs in general. Like for the map that we use, in order to test all of the different possibilities of like what could potentially go wrong, one of the developers created a mock API that we tested against in the days leading up to it. And then it turned out that there was a change in the API that happened like mid-election that we had that had to be addressed. So the challenges there, I think, are more with understanding the intricacies of the API rather than anything you necessarily be doing in D3.
Okay, thanks. I hope that answered the question from the audience. Now I'd like to involve Ryan Warner. So the question is, again, getting back to your own knowledge base and so on. So the question is, how, or I would say, can you remember a case, probably like the best case or the most interesting case, when your knowledge base paid you off, like really well, very well?
Yeah, for sure. I think it pays off constantly every day.
Oh yeah.
I can't recall a specific case that stands out among others, but there's a lot of times when I'm asked the same question over and over again, and it's great to just have a link to give a person about a specific topic. For example, I've been asked about next generation image formats like WebP, and a few months ago, I wrote a note in my digital garden about WebP and how I use it at work. And so now I just have that to link back to. And cases like that pop up more often than you think. If you're being asked questions from your peers or friends or coworkers over and over again, I think it's time for you to start making a knowledge base.
Fair enough. Actually, yeah, that's the best answer to this question. The best moment, the things that happen the most and they are used the most, these are actually daily routines. Quite often we think that if we pick a huge challenge and we solve it, it will solve everything. But the things that bother us the most or take the most energy and time and resources, these are the things, it's just your daily routine. And if there is something, let's say even a question that you have to answer to the other people or even to yourself, And this question is addressed almost every day. Just imagine that saving 10, 15 minutes every day can transform into a huge amount over a month or even over a year. And I'm sure if Daniel builds us a nice chart, we're gonna see that the trend is always on top for the regular things. Regarding paying off, however, for example, in my practice, I realized that in most cases, in addition to frequently asked questions, is actually the way of investigating some complex things that look quite familiar. For example, if you have if your application throws an exception and you already spent some time, like an hour or 2 hours, or I don't know, even a half day, just to investigate the root cause, most likely in a few months, when this situation happens again, you're gonna spend almost the same time to investigate it. Okay. Oh, I can see quite a lot of new questions here. So let's. The good question is about learning curve, actually. And the question, there are different options of this. One of it sounds like, do you think it's better for a React beginner to start learning Gatsby, or it is better at first to have a deeper understanding of React? What would be the learning curve for Gatsby? And I think we can extend a little bit this question and ask in general about the learning curve and maybe some alternative steps that you would like to recommend to junior developers how to get deeper involved into React itself. Who's gonna start it?
I can go. I think that the best way to get into anything JavaScript wise, front end wise, is probably to, I mean, how to frame this. The success that I've had, I suppose, in learning new frameworks and that sort of thing has been when there's like a desire to use it for something that it gives you. So for example, with Gatsby, that's a way to write React, a React based like content site generally is what that's used for. So if that's like what you're going for, then that's a good reason, excuse me, to use it to learn React. There's a lot of people that would argue like you should really learn JavaScript before you learn a framework. So before you even touch React at all, you should be well versed in JavaScript. And I don't think that's necessarily, I don't think that's a necessity. I think that you will be, if there are certain like constructs with JavaScript that you have at least a decent grasp on, then you will not have such a difficult time when you go to learn React. But I don't think you need to be a JavaScript expert to go to learn React. I think you can start with React and sort of backfill and work your way backwards. That's what I recommend. But I do recommend that people have like at least somewhat of an understanding about like arrays and objects and that kind of thing. So in the same way, I think that if you want to get to a product, which is maybe a blog or something like that, where Gatsby really shines, and you want to learn React along the way, there's no reason that you can't do that. You're going to be writing React anyway in a Gatsby Gatsby website. So why not go right to Gatsby instead of starting with basic React? But you'll get different opinions on this depending on who you talk to. I'm kind of the opinion that you can go straight to the thing you want to do as opposed to starting with the super low level building blocks.
Okay, thank you so much. Anyone else would give some advices for the new journers?
Yeah, I agree with Ryan on that 100%. I think you don't need to be a master of JavaScript to start learning with React. There are some things that, some complications that Gatsby will introduce, like GraphQL for some of the data layer. But you can kind of avoid that your first go around. And I think it also is important to understand the difference between static generation and client-side rendering versus server-side rendering, so you kind of know, what you're getting into with Gatsby and why you might choose it. But other than that, I think going right for Gatsby is totally fine if that meets your needs.
Okay, thanks. Danielle, would you like to share a few advices with the new generation?
I mean, I can't speak about Gatsby in
Yeah, no worries.
particular, but I will echo what Ryan and Ryan both said. That yeah, go just like if you want to start learning React, just start learning it. Certain things for sure are helpful, like JavaScript concepts are helpful to understand, and I think you'll pick them up along the way, just like, you know, mapping functions and those sorts of things, but might as well just get into it.
Thank you, Danielle. Okay, our time is over now. We've got 10 minutes window before the next section starts. And just to finish it, and especially enjoying this conversation, I would like to share the few last words from each one of you. So today you've been representing a really interesting combination of your speeches. It's so the thing is that we've been talking about representation of the data in one side. Then we've been talking about the building personal knowledge base in public, which is a little bit different from the personal database. And then we've been talking about actually the full stack development loop with Nexus and Prisma and some deep chunks into that. We've been given a lot of advices to the new generation, which is why I think most of people are here attending this session and asking their questions. So I would like to ask you to say just one last empowering word to the junior developers in your specific domain. Why so? Raise your hand to book one or two fingers to book a place in the queue. Let's go. Okay, Ryan Chenkie has booked the second place. Perfect. Who's gonna go the first? Third place.
I'll go first.
Carrick. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, my advice to junior devs or people just starting out is to start writing today. Don't worry about where your writing is going. Don't worry about how good it is or what point you're trying to make. Don't worry about if someone else has already written about it 10 times before you. Just start putting stuff out there, and the rest will kind of fall into place with time and consistency.
That's just brilliant. Thank you. Second place in the queue, Ryan Chenkie.
So I will refer back to the advice that I was talking about earlier, where if you are wanting to understand how all of these pieces of web development fit together, then build something that you want to see exist. Come up with some idea for like a product that you think would be awesome if it existed, and figure out what you need to do to make that happen. Stumble along the way, use Google liberally, and figure out the pieces as you go. I think that's the best way, rather than reading all the books in the world and then applying that knowledge. I think if you get in the mud, as it were, along the way, that's going to be the best way to give yourself a good education to becoming a beyond a junior developer. That's my advice.
Thank you. Very nice advice. Danielle?
Yeah, I'd say my advice would be just do it. If you are interested in learning something and building something, just open up the code editor and start going right now. Googling for pretty much all of your questions can be answered somewhere on the internet. Again, the best way is to try and see what parts you can figure out, what parts are more difficult, but the difficult parts are gonna get easier.
Right, thanks. So guys, just to summarize this, for all the junior developers, get an ambitious goal, write down the path that you're passing through it, and never be afraid, because you can see there are good examples of people who had, let's say, completely different domain or knowledge, and then they switched up. And also, if you collect enough data, then you can just use free or any other library and build a nice chart and a nice visual story about it. Okay, guys, I enjoyed this session a lot. Thank you for participating in our Geekle React Online Summit. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
This was awesome.
See you soon. Bye bye.